ensure a peaceful conclusion to the holy season of Ramadan. And he also affirmed our unwavering support for Israel and its defense needs, and welcomed the historic $1 billion allocation to replenish Israel's Iron Dome system.
Okay, the follow-up is, in view of continued Palestinian violence against innocent civilians, is the Biden administration willing to stop payments to the anti-Semitic UN agency UNRWA and support restoring the Jewish cemetery in Vilnius, Lithuania to its former glory?
Again, I think I don't have any changes to announce to our policy. I spoke to our condemnation of the violence just now, last week as well, and noted also our call to the Prime Minister. Go ahead.
Point of clarification on the aid that the U.S. has already allocated to Ukraine.
Sure.
The president said last week that he had almost exhausted his drawdown ability. So how much after that announcement of the $800 million on Thursday does the U.S. have left to provide Ukraine?
I'm sure I can get you the specific exact number. It was almost about $3.5 billion total of drawdown authority, I believe. I will double check that number for you. So what he was referring to is because of how quickly we've been moving the military assistance to the Ukrainians on the ground, we anticipated being almost at a near end of that drawdown authority. So that's why he's going to put forward a new package this week.
Student debt cancellation, yesterday Senator Elizabeth Warren said that the White House has essentially already canceled some student debt by waiving interest on that student debt, and it could use that same exact authority to cancel student debt permanently. Does the White House agree with that view? This is about the authority, not whether you will, but that you can derive the authority in the same exact way.
I don't have anything to preview for you in terms of any authority and how it would work. What I would tell you is that not a single person in this country has paid a dime on federal student loans since the president took office. And what we have said is that he would make a decision about any cancellation of student debt before the conclusion of that pause on student loans. But I don't have anything to preview for you at this point in time.
On that, she said that it was an issue of racial equity. Does the White House view this as a racial equity issue?
Well, again, I think the president views student loan relief, debt relief as something that impacts, yes, it is a racial equity issue, but it is also an issue that impacts many individuals, young people, middle-aged people of all races. It is something that he has been a vital priority to the president, which again is why not a single person has paid a penny, a dime or a penny in student loans since he took office. Go ahead, JJ. I don't want to forget you. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Two questions on the supplemental funding, and then
yeah.
One on Cedric Richmond.
Yeah.
On the supplemental, has the administration decided to definitely combine the COVID funding with the aid for Ukraine?
We don't have the mechanism yet. These are conversations that we'll have with Congress. Obviously, prior to the recess, there was the proposal that did combine, but don't have a sense yet.
And then is the White House considering extending the Title 42 immigration restrictions as part of a deal with Congress? Are you considering it?
Again, this would be Congress having the discussion. We're continuing to prepare for a May 23rd implementation. There'll be a range of conversations about this over the coming days.
The New York Times is reporting that Cedric
yes.
Richmond is leaving. Is he? And just last week, he said publicly that he wouldn't leave unless the president asked him to. So something changed there?
Yes. Okay. Well, let me first say that Cedric Richmond continues to be a vital, essential advisor to the president, was on the campaign, continues to be in the White House. I have been in many meetings with Cedric Richmond where the president goes to him and looks to him for his political sense, his assessment of Congress. He trusts him implicitly. I have nothing to announce at this point, but I can assure you when we have something to announce, it will involve a new important role for Cedric Richmond and something the president is excited about and has asked him to do.
Jen,
go ahead.
We saw the readout from the call with the French president. Did the president see any larger meaning in the French elections in terms of the support of the Allied effort against Russia?
I don't have any assessment of that. I'll leave that to others to do analysis of. The president was pleased with the outcome. As you know, he spoke with President Macron this morning, and he's looking forward to continuing to work with him in standing up against Russian aggression and standing with the Ukrainian people.
And just along those lines, Ron Klain tweeted an interesting observation that President Macron secured a double-digit victory at a time when his approval rating was 36%. Was there anything he was suggesting?
I don't have any more analysis to provide on that front, though. Appreciate the question. Go ahead.
on NATO, reports in Finland and Sweden say that the two countries are preparing to apply to join NATO as early as next month. Is the White House supportive of that effort?
Well, those are decisions for these countries to make and for the NATO alliance to make, and so we'll leave it to those entities.
And then just on gun violence, we learned more about Friday's shooter today from DC police, who say he had hundreds of rounds of unspent ammo inside his Connecticut Avenue apartment. And then today, the DC mayor announced a new police initiative to target violent crime. Does the president believe he's done all he can do to fight violent crime, gun issues around this country without the intervention of Congress?
Well, he will continue to look for every authority he has to take steps to address gun violence, violent crimes across the country. The last time we had data was in 2020, I believe, and at that time about 77% of homicides were done with a firearm, and you saw him talk 2 weeks ago now, it's all running together, but 2 weeks ago now, I believe, about ghost guns and the steps that he is going to continue to take to address ghost guns, which we have seen have a rising role in gun deaths and gun targeting over the past several months. I would also note that then, when he was doing that event, he highlighted that 2 LA sheriff's deputies who had been wounded by a shooter using a ghost gun. So that's just even an example of how even these ghost guns are being used to target police as well, which is also a problem. So I would say, of course, there are significant steps that Congress can take that would make these laws permanent. That is the president's first preference, whether it's background checks, banning assault weapons. These are laws that he has led the effort to pass throughout his career, many decades, but he will continue to look for any steps he can take using his own authorities, as he has done several times since taking office. I think he's done more than any other president using executive authority. Good.
Thanks, Jen. 2 questions for you. President Biden made his first endorsement of the midterm election cycle on Saturday, endorsing Congressman Kurt Schrader. Why did he decide to weigh in on this race first? And what would you say to some progressives who are frustrated that he endorsed Schrader over
I certainly understand your question. I don't make the rules, but the rules are I can't speak a lot about politics from here. So I would point you to the DNC, and I would point you to Congressman Schrader's office.
Second question for you. There's been a fair bit of speculation about Vladimir Putin's health based on recent videos of him. Has the White House made an assessment on this matter, and have concerns been raised internally at all about this topic?
I don't have any assessment to offer from here or any particular comment on the mental health of President Putin. Go ahead.
Jen, back to Title 42 quickly. I want
Yeah.
to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying today. I hear you talking about discussions going forward, the debate that's happening, all of that. Are you saying that Title 42, I know you're prepared to lift the current policy May 23rd. Are you saying that will happen unless Congress acts? Or are you saying the White House might do something else?
Congress would have to take action in order for the date not to be May 23rd.
On Hunter Biden, the New York Post is reporting, looking at White House visitor logs, there were 19 visits to the White House while the president was vice president by Hunter Biden's business partner, including one with the vice president. Can you help us understand why that business partner had access and what those meetings were about?
I don't have any information on that. I'm happy to check and see if we have any more comment.
Former Senator David Perdue last night, hoping to be a senator again, opened his debate by saying that the 2020 election was rigged and stolen. We know that most courts have ruled that it was fair. There's no evidence of fraud. But I wonder what you make of those comments, and has the White House done enough to push back and to make it clear that the election was not stolen?
I think that speaks to the former president's hold over factions of the Republican Party, not facts. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Jen. 2 questions on Brazil. First, last Friday, President Biden said the United States and rich countries should be paying Brazil to protect the Amazon. And he said he's trying to get this done. So what exactly is he trying to do? Is he trying to work with other rich countries, negotiating with Brazil? Is he ready to provide financial support to Brazil, and how much would that be?
So the science is, in the president's view, and the reason he made these comments, is that the science has only become more clear that the world needs to both strengthen and accelerate emissions reductions, and part of that goal includes conserving global forest ecosystems that remove carbon from the atmosphere and store more carbon than they emit in a year, serving as carbon sinks. So President Biden recognized the necessity of mobilizing funding from from world governments and the private sector, and the plan to conserve global forests, the critical carbon sinks launched at COP26, aims to mobilize finance from the public and private sector with a strong focus on levering private sector finance through market mechanisms. So that's what he was speaking to, and certainly an effort he continues to support.
And there is a delegation today from the State Department in Brazil. I wonder if this trip has anything to do with the war in Ukraine and perhaps the United States seeking or interested in working with Brazil on food and energy security.
I would really point you to the State Department. We are working with a range of countries, obviously, on addressing where we see any food shortages around the world, and obviously Ukraine is front and center on the minds of most global leaders.
And just a quick one. Why President Biden has declined to talk with President Bolsonaro? We know that the Brazilian government's been trying more than once. So why is he declining?
I don't have any update. The president obviously has a busy schedule. He has spoken with a range of global leaders, but not every single one. And you just noted the State Department is in Brazil for a visit. So I would note we have an ongoing dialogue at a high level. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah,
oh, okay. Either one. Okay. You're kind of matching today, I'll note. Yeah, there you go. In your suits in blue.
So more people are starting to talk about recession. Goldman Sachs and Bank of America alluded to it because of inflation. The steps that have been taken so far haven't seemed to work to get inflation to come back down. What additional steps are you guys looking at to curb inflation, as well as the feeling that the economy is headed in the wrong direction?
Well, I would say first, there are a number of strong economic indicators that we would point to. We created more jobs last year than any year in American history. The unemployment rate is at 3.6%. We know that costs are too high. Inflation, which the Federal Reserve has purview over, still projects that it will moderate by the end of the year. There are a number of steps they have, and they have indicated they have the plans to recalibrate. We support that effort. They have a lot of power here in terms of taking steps to address inflation. We are not, the president is not waiting for that to happen, and he's taking steps to address where we see costs increasing in different areas that impact the American people's pocketbooks, whether it's gas prices. Obviously, he made an announcement to tap the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, led the global release, led an effort to release from the globally to bring down gas prices. We've also taken steps to fix issues with our supply chain to make sure goods are moving as quickly as possible. And there's a lot of interest continues to be in Congress to take steps to lower costs on prescription drugs, healthcare, elder care, child care. Those are all steps that are based on the president's proposals.
The president has pushed those spending proposals. The San Francisco Federal Reserve released a report.
They'd be fully paid for, so they're not actually spending proposals. They're proposals to lower costs that are fully paid for.
The San Francisco Federal Reserve released a report saying that government spending accounted for 3% of the inflation that we're seeing now. So is spending more really the way to go?
Well, again, I think if you look back at where we were a year and a half ago, we're at the point where there was a significant economic downturn, where people were really suffering, struggling to put food on the table. People were out of work. And what we did at that time is take steps to help stem that economic downturn. And that was a decision made that the president continues to believe was in the interest of the American people.
Well, let's keep going on China. Looking at more lockdowns now, Beijing may be involved in that. Is there anything that the administration is looking at doing to help the supply chains if this clogs up again?
Yeah, so we're following this very closely, and as you know, there are a couple of different issues at play here. There's obviously Shenzhen, which has kind of reopened, and they had moved around where their goods were being produced and moved around which ports they were going through. Shanghai, obviously, and there are a couple of industries that were being impacted. We haven't seen at this point a decrease in ships coming to our ports in California from Asia. We obviously are continuing to monitor that, and Beijing has increased their testing, which could be a precursor to a lockdown, but we don't know at this point. So what we're doing right now is we're closely monitoring. The State Department is, our economic team is, but we haven't seen a slowdown in ships coming to our ports in California. If there's an increase as lockdowns decrease in some parts of China, we'll also be prepared for that because we've been able to take steps to reduce the number of cargo ships there.
Just one question, Jen. There's been a lot of explosions and strange fires at quite significant places in Russia over the last couple of weeks. Just most recently in the city of Bryansk, these oil containers blew up. There's a lot of speculation over what's causing it, and obviously one of the theories would be that the Ukrainians somehow are doing it. What is the U.S. position on Ukraine attacking inside Russian territory? Is this something that the U.S. would encourage them to do and try and help them do, in terms of the weapons, or is it something maybe where you advise the Ukrainians not to go there?
Oh, we don't have any confirmation of that. Ukraine is defending their own country, so I'm just not going to speak to a hypothetical.
I'm not asking for confirmation on things that have happened. It's just there's obviously a lot of speculation, and it's kind of an obvious point, right? Like they're fighting the Russians tooth and nail inside their own country, quite often near the borders, and the Russians are inside their country. So is there a U.S. position on whether the Ukrainians should have the right, or maybe even be encouraged to take their fight beyond their border?
Again, that is a hypothetical, so I'm not going to speak to it. Ukraine's country is being invaded. Russia is invading their country. That's what we're supporting them for, and there's been no confirmation of what you're detailing, so I'm just not going to speak to it. Go ahead.
If I may, we know the Congressional Hispanic Caucus members are here meeting with the president. I wonder if immigration and also Title 42 is being discussed, and I don't know how much you can reveal about that meeting that is taking place this afternoon.
So I don't have a readout of the meeting at this point in time. I would note that this is part of the series of meetings, as I noted earlier, that the president is doing with a range of the caucuses in Congress. He did the Congressional Black Caucus, he did KPAC, and he did these last year as well. So we certainly expect immigration to be a topic of discussion, but I would note that the CHC also has a stated position on Title 42 as a caucus, which is that they oppose any change to the decisions that has been made. So anything could be discussed, but I wouldn't anticipate that being a major topic.
If I may, on Transnistria.
Sorry, Mal, come to you next. Go ahead.
If I may, on Transnistria, there appears to have been some kind of attack on the Ministry of State Security. We know that Moscow has been talking about this area possibly entering the conflict. It seemed it happened on a holiday when there wouldn't have been people in the building. Does this bear the hallmarks of a false flag operation of the sort that you've been warning us about?
Yeah, I've seen the reports. I don't, obviously we have, of course, but I don't have any confirmation of the specifics or the details at this point in time from here.
Question on malaria.
Go ahead, Matt, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just have two. The first is with the CHC coming, some have wanted Biden, the administration, to do more on executive actions related to immigration. And I guess just philosophically, does the president believe that he's exhausted most of the things that he can do through executive power? You had alluded earlier about the legislative push.
Sure.
But are there things that he feels like he could still do through executive actions related to immigration?
I mean, I think his view is that taking steps and working with Congress to pass comprehensive immigration reform that has smarter security, that does put in place an asylum processing system that works, is the best step that will have a lasting impact. Obviously, we're continuing to assess any executive actions we can take, but he'll, I think, continue to discuss legislative actions as well.
And then secondly, you had mentioned this at the top about the toxic exposures, and that the president wants comprehensive legislation to be passed. The House has passed a version related to this. The Senate has passed a version.
Yeah.
The Senate version is sometimes criticized by advocates as not going far enough. So does the president have a stance on which piece of legislation he views as addressing this issue comprehensively? Is he getting involved in that? There's other legislation that hasn't been passed in the Senate that also grapples with this issue.
Sure. I mean, obviously, as you know, now the next step is for both bodies of Congress to work together and figure out the path forward. We did issue a SAP on the PAC Act. So beyond that, I don't think I have anything more to update you on that position. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. I had a question on Title 42, at the risk of this being a dumb question. So if the CDC is able to extend Title 42, why is it up to Congress? Can you just help people understand why it's on Congress to extend it now?
Sure. Congress gave the CDC authority to determine when the conditions would be met to lift Title 42, which again has never been an immigration authority or an immigration policy. It's always been a health authority. So when they determined we no longer had the conditions where we had to take action to quickly deport people who came to the country. They made that health decision based on data and science and the CDC decision making. Congress would need to make any decision about a change to the authority they gave the CDC.
Doesn't have the authority to just say things have changed again.
If the health and data conditions changed, they could certainly make a different decision, sure, but they make decisions based on health and data, not based on politics or where members of Congress sit.
Another coronavirus, actually, a follow up on that question, and something that was asked earlier. Is the president willing to sign something if it comes to his desk as part of a legislative package that would change the rules for how Title 42 is administered? Because if it is in fact, it is up to Congress, ultimately that would get to the president's desk and he would ultimately have to either sign it or veto it.
There's a lot of steps between now and then, so at this point that's very premature. There are many members who strongly would like to see Title 42 extended. There are many who strongly have the other point of view. So we are not anywhere near that point in time. Go ahead.
The Surgeon General has said that misinformation about COVID amounts to a public health crisis.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, regardless of ownership, would the White House be interested in working with Twitter like it has in the past to continue to combat this kind of misinformation? Or are we in a different part of the pandemic where that kind of partnership is no longer necessary?
Well, I think we engage regularly with all social media platforms about steps that can be taken. That has continued, and I'm sure it will continue. But there are also reforms that we think Congress could take, and we would support taking, including reforming Section 230, enacting antitrust reforms, requiring more transparency, and the president is encouraged by the bipartisan support for or engagement in those efforts.
On the US and its allies in the Pacific, they've clearly been blindsided by China's security pact with the Solomon Islands, a very strategic location in the Pacific. Kurt Campbell was down there only last week, and he announced some initiatives on, speeding up the embassy there, sending a hospital boat, that sort of thing. The question is, why wouldn't the US commit to far more significant security/military initiatives in such a strategic place like that? And also, I wonder what would the Biden administration want from other countries? And Australia hasn't exactly been very well prepared for this Chinese-Solomon agreement either.
Yeah, it's a great group of questions. I have not talked to Kurt Campbell about this since he returned. I'm not sure if the president has. I can see if there's anything more we can update you on in our policy.
Thank you. The president has issued a statement on malaria. The president just issued a statement on Malaria Day. Since the time you started speaking, almost 100 children have died of malaria. He said a child dies every 2 minutes of malaria. Is the president prepared to increase funding, maybe fight malaria the same way the U.S. has been fighting COVID?
It's obviously something the president cares deeply about, as we do as an administration. I don't have anything for you in terms of predictions of additional funding. I can see if there's anything more from USAID. Go ahead.
On the TPS, I know the administration has just granted TPS to Cameroonians living in the U.S. Why not extend it to Ethiopia and Nigeria, other African countries that are also in crisis?
Yeah, I know you've asked me a similar question before. It's an effort or a process led by the Department of Homeland Security to make a determination about conditions on the ground and an interagency process. I don't have anything to predict at this point. Obviously, they're continuing to assess.
I wanted to ask about your announcement from last week on refugees from Ukraine.
Yeah.
I know you're supposed to open the portal for applications today for
Yep.
DHS. Can you talk about how you're preparing the resources to be able to accept what I'm sure is going to be a big influx of applications as soon as that portal opens?
So the Department of Homeland Security is going to do a briefing this afternoon with more details to provide to you, and obviously they will oversee the process. And you're right, we certainly anticipate lots of interest on both sides.
Will there be someone in the White House? I know when you were working on Operation Afghans Welcome,
Yeah.
there was someone in charge of it from this end. Is there going to be someone over here that's working on it?
Sure. Obviously, Russia and Ukraine and implementing all of our programs is a top priority for the national security team. I will see if there was one individual who'll be responsible.
Thanks so much. On the coronavirus, Jen, on the coronavirus, you talked about China and the tariffs potentially coming off. Can you speak about anything that President Biden has done to determine the source of the coronavirus with China?